Criticism. One of my favorite things to do, often unsolicited. The act of sharing an opinion on something using undisputable facts mixed with personal beliefs. But doing the research necessary to form a proper criticism of your own is so much work nowadays. Better to let an internet influencer have an opinion for you, like me. I'm sure that's why you all clicked this video and not to angrily disagree with me in the comments. So without further ado, here's my criticism of the story of Final Fantasy XIV and its most recent expansion, Endwalker. Before I dive in, I just want to clear up a few things so there aren't any misconceptions. First off, I love Final Fantasy XIV. Overall, I think the game is amazing, as stated many times in my previous video. However, that does not mean I think the game is perfect. Second, this video is meant to primarily discuss the plot and how that plot is delivered, not gameplay or other aspects of the game. And lastly, at the end of the day, this is just one Lala's opinion, and you all hold the right to completely trash that opinion in the comments. Be gentle. A quick Google search will tell you that criticism is the analysis and judgment of the merits and faults of a literary or artistic work. Keywords here being merits and faults. Final Fantasy XIV arguably gets better with each and every expansion. Though that's not saying much since the first version of the game was an absolute dumpster fire. Final Fantasy XIV has had its fair share of good and bad, just like any other game, but does a great job at adapting year after year to deliver a better overall experience. The story, however, is an anomaly, where it seems the majority of players have varying opinions, ranging from easily skippable to best story ever written. After playing through the story and letting the whole thing process for some time, I think I have narrowed it down to 3 points. Pacing, stakes, and the Deus Ex Machina. Don't worry, the game gets good after
many unbearable hours later.
It's no secret that MMOs take a while to get off the ground. When you have a whole fantasy world of backstory to catch up on, it can seem extremely daunting. Endwalker circumvents this by constantly reminding you of the imminent danger of the end of the world. While there were definitely quests that were more world-building focused, they always took a backseat in comparison to the character building of the main cast, as well as the rising action of the plot. However, this is very different to what previous expansions had done before, and can make the new areas in the game feel much smaller than what they are imagined to be. To put this in perspective, there are 3 in-game areas dedicated to both Alamigo and Doma, but only 1 area for Garlemald, which is an area that has been hyped up since the release of the game. This could be good or bad, depending on the kind of player you are, but I can't help feel a little sad that I didn't get to experience an expansion completely dedicated to Garlemald and its 14 legions. So much potential just deleted from existence. I think this mostly has to do with something that the game director, Naoki Yoshida, had said in a comment in regards to the Endwalker expansion. There's a bigger risk that dragging the story on for so long would weaken the impact due to the decrease in momentum, and it would be harder to round off the plot with further characters in the mix. Shadowbringers had a very big ending, and to come down from that high could potentially hurt the story they worked so hard to build up. A good example of this is the huge drop of falling action following Heavensward leading into Stormblood. When you go from slaying dragons to discussing politics, it could put some players to sleep. My guess would be that they had 2 expansions planned following Shadowbringers to finish the Hydaelyn Zodiac story. In order to prevent another Stormblood situation, they condensed 3 major areas of the world in 1 expansion. As for what I feel about the pacing in Endwalker, it's jarring. There are times when the story grinds to a halt in order to explain a dilemma that's going on in a specific area or group of people undergoing a significant paradigm shift, only to be ripped away to a completely new area across the world, or across space, or across time. You get the picture. To put it simply, it's hard to become emotionally invested in any one thing when there is so much going on. Even taking the time to look around and talk to NPCs, I felt rushed because the world was literally ending. Which leads me to my next point.
Oh god, we are all gonna die, somebody please save us.
Yeah, I'll get to it eventually, right after I find out why Y'shtola showed up at my door at night. For some reason, writers seem to think that raising the stakes over and over again will raise the audience's attention with it, when really, the two are not correlated. Uncertainty is key here. It doesn't matter how high the stakes are if I already know how the story's going to end. The result is apathy in both possible outcomes. Either I don't care because the world is saved and I knew the writers would be out of their minds to destroy the world they worked so hard to build, or the world actually ends and everything about the game that I cared about goes along with it. Uncertainty, however, really gets the audience's eyeballs glued to the screen. When you have something in the story that has significant uncertainty, but is not vital to the story's outcome, audience investment increases. In layman's terms, things that lack plot armor are way more interesting because anything can happen. Of course, this has to be something that the audience member specifically cares about, and it could vary from person to person. Some people find Hoshafron's death extremely sad, whereas others less so. Two examples of extremely well-written story are the quest Alea Lactac Est and Warm Hearts Rekindled Hopes. From a 1st Legion war commander putting a pistol to his own throat after choosing death over siding with the enemy, to an anxious elephant running from monsters all the while carrying a newly orphaned baby that is turning into a monster. These extremely minor characters in the grand scheme of things are way more interesting than, let's say, the impending doom of the whole world. It's much easier to grasp the harsh reality of what's going on immediately around you, rather than a whole planet. Unfortunately, MMOs suffer from one major issue regarding stakes. Our characters are immortal. The Warrior of Light must stay alive, or at least be playable in the story, in order to progress through the game. Therefore, anything that threatens our character's life is immediately disregarded because there's nothing to lose. Things get especially dicey when our character is put in an impossible situation where, logically, we should lose. Introducing the Deus Ex Machina. For those of you who don't know, a Deus Ex Machina is a plot device that is used to abruptly turn bad situations into good ones. A classic example of this is the movie War of the Worlds, where aliens seem to be winning, only to suddenly lose to the common cold. I want to make it very clear that I do not like Deus Ex Machinas. I think they're lazy, uninspired, and overall damaging to the world that they're written for. With that being said, I think they do have their place in a good story when used in a clever way, or when used as a comedic device. During the climax of Endwalker, our Warrior of Light is faced with an impossibly strong threat that seeks the total annihilation of the universe. Those are some pretty hefty stakes. Admittingly, the story is wonderfully laid out to carefully show that the negative emotions of Meteion were shattered with the appearance of the flower bed, proving that Hermes had kept his promise of giving Meteion a flower upon her return. Her hold over the power of Dynamis weakened, and our hero was able to press on. What I didn't like was Xeno's seemingly random appearance. His reason for traveling space to come see us seemed thrown together. Yeah, we had some leftover ether in the mother crystal, so I ate it and flew here. I felt there was still so much to be told with his character. Xenos' development took an interesting turn after he absorbed Zodiark, and then he all but vanished from the storyline, only to come back in the end to take a backseat to a new threat that was introduced late into the story. Like Garlemald, Baja, and many other parts of the story, I felt Xenos was fantastically written, only to essentially be gutted and rushed out of the story in the end. While I understand the pressure to deliver an expansion in a timely manner that is easily digestible, I wish so many parts of Final Fantasy XIV's story weren't sacrificed to do so. Now I want to say this before I move on to my hopes for future expansions. I still think it's quite mind-blowing that a story like this even exists. There were some unprecedented things that took place throughout Endwalker, and thinking back, I'm still amazed at how masterfully some of the story was delivered. Endwalker brilliantly uses subtle transitions of heart-wrenching moments to hilarious comedic relief, all the while convincing me that the sound director, Masayoshi Soken, had sold his soul to the devil to compose music this good. But if I had to come up with an analogy to sum up my issues with Endwalker, I would say that it felt like I was given a 10-course meal of food that didn't pair well together. I got full most of the way through, and the dessert I was looking forward to in the end felt like an afterthought. To put it simply, it was too big. I hope that future expansions will be modeled more like Heavensward and Shadowbringers. These stories have a much smaller setting where everything takes place in a relatively small area. The sense of adventure and role-playing are so important to an RPG, and there's a certain magic to roaming around, learning something new, and leaving your mark. Raising the stakes are important to adding weight to a story, but not so much where I stop caring altogether. While end-of-the-world stories sound cool on the surface, saving a friend that has been possessed by a dragon's rage is more than enough stakes to keep me staying up all night to see what happens next. So there you have it. I hope you enjoyed this Ranting Lala's opinion on Endwalker. If you've made it this far, let me know in the comments how you feel about the story. Also, let me know if you like this style of content. This was heavily influenced by creators like Joe Cat and Overly Sarcastic Productions. And lastly, subscribe if you want to see more content like this. I'm out. See you.